At 8:23 a.m. on August 26, 1914, Second Lieutenant Frederick Thomas Steele watched through binoculars as German infantry emerged from the tree line, 800 yards across the Monscond Canal. The 23-year-old officer from Lancashire had been in France. Exactly 11 days, his combat experience, 0. But this morning Lieutenant Steele commanded for Vickers Mark I water-cooled machine guns and 36 enlisted men positioned along a 200-yard section of canal bank near the village of Entrenched, Belgium. Intelligence reports said German the Fourth Corps was moving through the area. Perhaps 500 men. The binoculars revealed something different. Steele counted company after company of German infantry in field grey uniforms forming up in the wheat fields beyond the canal. He stopped counting at 40 companies. Approximately 2,000 men. British Army doctrine said withdraw when outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Steele had 40 soldiers. He was outnumbered 50 to 1. Each Vickers machine gun weighed 40 pounds without water. 250-round fabric belts of .303 British ammunition. Maximum sustained rate of fire, 500 rounds per minute per gun. Theoretical capacity, 2,000 rounds per minute from 4 guns combined. Water jackets held 1 gallon each. At sustained fire, water boiled in approximately 90 seconds. Without water circulation, barrels would warp in 45 seconds and seize completely in 2 minutes. Behind Steele's position, 14th Brigade retreating toward Mons. 63 wounded soldiers being evacuated by medical orderlies. 7 ammunition wagons. If German infantry crossed the canal here, they would cut British line of retreat. 14,000 men would be surrounded. Steele had orders to hold this position for 30 minutes. Give retreating units time to establish defensive line to miles back. Then withdraw. But at 8:27 a.m., German artillery began ranging shots. First shells fell 200 yards short. Second salvo, 100 yards short. Third salvo, 50 yards over. German gunners had bracketed the position. Next rounds would land directly on Steele's machine gun nests. He had perhaps 90 seconds before artillery destroyed his position. Standard doctrine: abandon position before artillery strike. Steele gave opposite order: load weapons, prepare to fire. Hold until my command. Private William Clark, 19 years old, from Birmingham, operated gun number 3. Clark had fired exactly 47 practice rounds during training at Aldershot. His machine gun instructor had called the Vickers temperamental. Said most crews couldn't maintain fire for more than 30 seconds without jamming. Clark's hands were shaking, not from fear, from excitement. He'd joined the army 8 months earlier. Wanted to see combat before war ended. Everyone said war would be over by Christmas. Clark didn't want to miss it. At 8:29 a.m., German artillery rounds impacted 20 yards behind machine gun positions. Shrapnel screamed overhead. Dirt and debris rained down. 1 shell fragment cut through Private James Murphy's left arm. Murphy, gun number 4 loader, kept feeding ammunition belt into receiver. Blood ran down his arm onto the brass cartridges. At 8:31 a.m., German infantry began advancing. Not running, walking. Parade ground formation, shoulder to shoulder. Rifles at port arms. 2,000 men moving in waves across 600 yards of open wheat field toward canal. This was how German army trained to attack fortified positions. Mass infantry assault. Overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers. Accept casualties as necessary cost. Breakthrough defensive line. Exploit breakthrough with cavalry. Standard German doctrine, since Franco-Prussian War, 1870-71, had worked against French at Sedan, worked against Austrians at Königgrätz. German High Command believed it would work against British at Mons. They were wrong. At 600 yards, Steele gave the command. Fire, for Vickers, machine guns opened fire simultaneously. 2,000 rounds per minute. The sound was unlike anything Clark had heard during training. Not the sharp crack of rifle fire. Something deeper, mechanical, like industrial machinery. Like textile looms in Birmingham factories where his father worked. But louder, much louder. Sound rolled across the canal and echoed off stone buildings in Odregnes. At 600 yards, first German soldiers began falling. Not one at a time, entire sections. 8 men, 10 men, 15 men, falling simultaneously as 303 rounds cut through parade ground formation. German soldiers in rear ranks continued advancing, stepping over bodies, maintaining formation. At 500 yards, German officers began shouting orders. Formation shifted, companies spreading wider, increasing intervals between men, attempting to reduce casualties from machine gun fire. But for Vickers, guns were putting 2,000 rounds downrange every minute. Even with increased spacing, every burst found targets. German soldiers began running. Not advancing, running, breaking parade ground discipline, seeking cover in wheat field. But wheat provided no protection against .303 ammunition. Rounds cut through stalks and struck men attempting to hide. At 400 yards, first German infantry reached a shallow drainage ditch running parallel to canal. Perhaps 2 feet deep, not real cover, but better than standing in open wheat field. Approximately 300 German soldiers pressed into the ditch. Officers were shouting, pointing toward British positions, attempting to organize renewed assault. Clark's gun barrel was glowing red. Water in cooling jacket had reached boiling point. Steam hissed from release valve. Private Thomas Bennett, Clark's number 2, poured cold water from canteen into jacket reservoir. Steam increased temporarily, then subsided. Gun kept firing. At 8:39 a.m., German soldiers in drainage ditch rose and charged. 300 men covering final 400 yards to canal. Full sprint, bayonets fixed. This was the critical moment. If German infantry reached canal bank, they could use terrain as cover. Cross in groups, establish foothold on British side. Once across, numerical superiority would matter. 300 Germans against 40 British in close combat meant British position would be overrun in minutes. Steele ordered concentration of fire, all 4 guns targeting German charge. 2,000 rounds per minute, into 300 men, covering 400 yards. German soldiers were running approximately 15 miles per hour. Would reach canal in 55 seconds. For Vickers' guns had 55 seconds to stop 300 men. Clark watched through gun sights as German soldiers sprinted toward him. Could see individual faces now, young men, his age. Mouths open, shouting he'd never killed anyone. Had imagined this moment during training. Thought he might hesitate, feel something, but finger kept squeezing. Trigger. Gun kept firing. Bodies kept falling. At 300 yards, German charge faltered. Not from orders, from casualties. Too many men falling, soldiers behind them stumbling over bodies, formation disintegrating. At 250 yards, charge broke completely. Surviving German soldiers turned back toward drainage ditch. Running away from British positions, machine guns followed them, firing into backs of retreating infantry. At 8:41 a.m., German artillery resumed firing. But something had changed. Instead of targeting British machine gun positions, shells began falling on drainage ditch where German infantry had taken cover. German artillery was firing on their own soldiers. This was not accident, this was doctrine. German artillery officers had standing orders. If infantry assault fails, and soldiers refuse to advance, artillery will fire on position to force renewed attack or eliminate cowardice. 77mm shells exploded among 200 German soldiers packed in shallow ditch. Men had nowhere to go, no cover from above. Those who stood to run were cut down by British machine guns. Those who stayed in ditch were killed by German artillery. At 8:44 a.m., German artillery ceased fire. Of approximately 300 German soldiers who had charged toward canal, fewer than 40 made it back to tree line. Clark's gun had fired 1,847 rounds in 13 minutes. Barrel was warped. Cooling jacket had cracked. Water was leaking through rupture. Gun was done, finished. Should have failed after 90 seconds of sustained fire. Ran 13 minutes through mechanical determination and Bennett's constant water circulation. Gun number 1 had fired 2,103 rounds. Barrel seized at 8:43 a.m. Bolt welded to receiver from heat. Crew abandoned gun. Gun number 2. 1,654 rounds. Stopped firing at 8:42 when ammunition belt twisted and jammed feed mechanism. Private Robert Taylor spent 90 seconds clearing jam. Gun resumed firing. Gun number 4. 1,921 rounds. Murphy had lost significant blood from shrapnel wound. Kept loading ammunition until he collapsed at 8:45 a.m. At 8:46 a.m., Steele received runner from Brigade Command. Message: hold position, additional 20 minutes. Wounded evacuation delayed. Maintain defensive line until 9:10 a.m. Steele had 3 functional machine guns, perhaps 4,000 rounds of ammunition remaining. Murphy, unconscious, gun number 1 destroyed. The 30 minutes he'd been ordered to hold had become 50 minutes. Across the canal, German infantry was reforming. Different tactics this time. No parade ground formations, small groups, using terrain, moving through wheat field in rushes. Approximately 800 men preparing second assault. At 8:52 a.m., German infantry advanced again. But this time, German artillery fired smoke shells. White phosphorus creating thick smoke screen across wheat field. British machine gunners couldn't see targets, were firing blind into smoke, hoping rounds would find German soldiers somewhere in the obscured field. Sound became critical. Clark listened for boots on ground. Shouts in German, equipment rattling. Fired short bursts to ward any sound. At 9:03 a.m., smoke cleared enough to see German infantry had reached drainage ditch. Approximately 400 men, 200 yards from canal. They'd advanced under cover of smoke without significant casualties. German officers were organizing soldiers, preparing final assault. 200 yards. 40 British soldiers. 3 machine guns. 2,400 rounds of ammunition remaining. Then Clark had an idea. German soldiers were packed in drainage ditch. Concentrated target. Unable to spread out without exposing themselves to machine gun fire. If all 3 guns concentrated fire on ditch itself, rounds would ricochet off hardpan bottom, bounce upward, hit soldiers sheltering in ditch from angles they couldn't protect against. Clark explained to Steele. Steele ordered gun numbers 2 and 4 to implement same tactic. At 9:05 a.m., 3 Vickers guns began firing into drainage ditch. Not at soldiers, at ground in front of them. .303 rounds struck hard, clay bottom of ditch. Ricocheted upward at approximately 15-degree angles. German soldiers had been using ditch as cover from direct fire. Now that same ditch was killing them. Rounds bouncing off bottom and striking them from below. Officers shouted orders. Soldiers attempted to climb out of ditch. Exposed themselves to direct machine gun fire. At 9:08 a.m., German bugler sounded retreat. Surviving infantry withdrew toward tree line running. No formation, no order, just running. At 9:11 a.m., Steele received second runner. Message: evacuation complete. Withdraw immediately. Steele ordered guns spiked. Crews drove steel rods through barrels to render weapons inoperable. Left them in place. 40 British soldiers withdrew toward Mons. They'd held position 48 minutes. Given retreating units time to establish defensive line. Saved 63 wounded soldiers from capture. Cost to British. Murphy died from blood loss during withdrawal. Private David Stevens killed by German sniper at 9:14 a.m. during retreat. 2 dead, 7 wounded. Cost 2 Germans. Medical reports filed by German IV Corps indicated 543 casualties during assault on Odregna's position. 187 confirmed killed. 356 wounded. Casualty ratio 13. 5-1 in favor of British defenders. German IV Corps commander, General Sixt von Armin, wrote in after-action report, British machine gun positions at Odregnes demonstrated defensive capability previously unknown. Single section held against 2 battalions. Casualties unacceptably. Recommend revision of assault doctrine when facing entrenched machine guns. Report was forwarded to German Supreme Command. Kaiser Wilhelm II, read report on August 29. According to Adekamp's diary, Kaiser's response: "How is it possible that 40 Englishmen stopped 2,000 German soldiers? This is not warfare. This is murder by machinery." Kaiser ordered investigation into British machine gun capabilities. Intelligence report concluded. British Army fields Vickers, Mark I, machine gun, water-cooled, belt-fed. Sustained rate of fire exceeds any weapon currently deployed by German forces. Single gun, operated by trained crew equivalent to firepower of 80 to 100 riflemen. British infantry sections, equipped with organic machine gun support, create defensive density that renders traditional infantry assault doctrine obsolete. German Army began immediate revision of assault tactics. End of parade, ground formations. Introduction of infiltration tactics. Small unit maneuvers. Use of terrain. Combined arms. Coordination. But these revisions took months to implement. Throughout autumn 1914, German infantry continued frontal assaults against entrenched British positions. Casualties mounted. Mons, 1st Ypres, Neuve Chapelle. By December 1914, German the Fourth Corps had lost 11,400 men, 43% casualties. Corps was pulled from Line 4 reconstitution. Many of those casualties, machine gun fire. Meanwhile, British Army examined O'Dregne's action. War Office requested detailed report from Steele. Wanted to understand how 4 machine guns held against 2,000 infantry. Steele's report emphasized 3 factors. First, water circulation. Bennett's constant refilling of cooling jackets allowed sustained fire beyond normal operational limits. Without continuous water supply, guns would have seized in 90 seconds. Second, ricochet technique. Firing into hard ground created unpredictable trajectories that defeated cover. German soldiers couldn't protect against rounds coming from angles they couldn't anticipate. Third, crew discipline. Despite casualties, artillery fire, and overwhelming numerical disadvantage, gun crews maintained fire discipline. No panic, no abandonment of position. Steele concluded report. Vickers machine gun, properly employed by trained crew with adequate ammunition and water supply, can hold defensive position against numerical superiority of 50 to 1. Weapons' psychological impact on attacking infantry may exceed its kinetic lethality. War Office distributed Steele's report to all infantry battalions. Machine gun doctrine was revised. Every British infantry battalion received machine gun company, 4 guns per company, 16 guns per battalion. Emphasis on interlocking fields of fire, overlapping coverage, defensive depth. By spring 1915, British Expeditionary Force had transformed from rifle-centric army to machine gun-enabled defensive force. O'Dregne's had proven what industrial warfare meant. Not courage, not tactics, not training. Sustained rate of fire. German Army learned same lesson, but learned it the hard way, through casualties. 543 men at O'Dregne's was just the beginning. By end of 1914, German casualties from machine gun fire exceeded 180,000 men. First World War would eventually claim 20 million lives. Machine guns killed more soldiers than any other weapon. Vickers Mark I would fire 5 billion rounds during the war. Some gun crews at Battle of Somme 1916 maintained continuous fire for 12 hours. One Vickers gun, operated by British Machine Gun Corps, fired over 1 million rounds during the war without mechanical failure. Gun was still operational in 1968. 54 years later, donated to Imperial War Museum. Sits in display case labeled Vickers Mark I, most reliable machine gun ever manufactured. But most visitors don't know the story, don't know about O'Dregne's, don't know about Clark and Bennett and Murphy, don't know about 40 men who changed how armies fight. Frederick Thomas Steele survived the war, promoted to captain, then major, commanded machine gun company during some offensive, wounded 3 times. Mentioned in dispatches 7 times. Retired from Army 1929 with rank of lieutenant colonel. Returned to Lancashire. Opened hardware shop. sold tools and farming equipment for 31 years. Never talked about Entrenched. When people asked about his service, he'd say he was machine gun officer. That's all. No details. No stories. No mention of August 26, 1914. Private William Clark returned to Birmingham. Worked in munitions factory 1915 to 1918. Produced .303 ammunition. Same ammunition he'd fired at Entrenched. After war, returned to textile industry. Operated looms for 42 years. The sound reminded him of Vickers guns. Every day, for 42 years. Clark died, 1963, age 68. Obituary mentioned, veteran of First World War. Served with distinction. Did not mention he'd killed perhaps 200 German soldiers in 13 minutes. Did not mention he'd helped hold position that saved 14,000 British troops from encirclement. Private Thomas Bennett received no medal, no commendation, no recognition. Official records show he served as machine gun loader. Nothing about water circulation under fire. Nothing about keeping guns operational when they should have failed. Bennett died from Spanish flu in 1919. 24 years old, buried in Reading Cemetery. Gravestone reads, Private Thomas Bennett, 14th Brigade, 1895 to 1919. That's all. Private James Murphy died during withdrawal from Entrenched. Bled out from shrapnel wound at 9:27 a.m. on August 26, 1914. Body recovered 2 days later during British counterattack. Buried in Entrenched Communal Cemetery. Grave marker, Private J. Murphy, died in service of king and country. No mention that he loaded ammunition with severed artery. No mention that he kept gun firing while bleeding to death. No mention that his determination gave British forces 11 additional minutes of covering fire. 1991, military historian researching early machine gun tactics found reference to Entrenchd's action in German archives. Casualty reports. After-action reviews. Kaiser's comments. Historian cross-referenced with British records. Found Steele's report. Found casualty lists. Tracked down Clark's family. Clark's grandson still had his medals. Had diary Clark kept during war. One entry, dated August 26, 1914. Fired 1,847 rounds today. Gun number 3 ran hot but didn't quit. Germans kept coming. We kept firing. Bennett kept pouring water. Murphy kept loading, even after he was hit. We held, don't know how, but we held. Historian estimated machine gun fire at Entrenched killed or wounded 543 German soldiers in 48 minutes. Casualty rate, 11.3 per minute. Higher than any other engagement in August 1914. Higher than most engagements throughout entire war. 4. Machine guns. 40 soldiers. Changed how armies fight, but nobody remembers. Steele's hardware shop closed 1961. Building demolished 1974. No plaque, no marker. Nothing indicating Lieutenant Colonel, who commanded one of the most successful defensive actions in military history, had worked there 31 years. Clark's textile factory closed 1987. Converted to apartment complex. No recognition that worker who operated loom number 7 for 42 years had also operated gun number 3 at Entrenched. Bennett has no memorial. Just gravestone in Reading. Most people who visit cemetery walk past without stopping. Murphy's grave in Entrenched is maintained by Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Gets perhaps 20 visitors per year. Most don't know the story. Just see another name. Another casualty. Another young man who died in 1914. But Murphy wasn't just another casualty. He was loader who kept ammunition feeding while bleeding to death. Gave British forces 11 minutes of covering fire that saved thousands of soldiers from encirclement. That matters. For Vickers machine guns from Entrenched were left behind during withdrawal. Destroyed by British crews to prevent capture. German forces recovered weapons on August 27th. Sent them to Ordnance Depot for analysis. Engineers examined warped barrels, cracked cooling jackets, seized mechanisms. Report concluded. British machine guns were fired beyond any reasonable operational limit. Damage indicates sustained fire at maximum rate for minimum 10 to 15 minutes continuously. German MG08 would fail under identical conditions. British weapon design demonstrates superior thermal management and mechanical reliability. Report influenced German machine gun development. Led to improved water circulation systems. Enhanced barrel cooling. Modified MG08-15. Introduced 1915 incorporated. Several design features reverse engineered from captured Vickers guns. In strange way, for machine guns that Germans captured at Entrenched helped improve their own weapons, helped make war even deadlier. By 1916, both sides had learned. Machine guns dominated battlefield. Infantry couldn't advance against interlocking fields of fire. Warfare became stalemate. Trenches stretched from English Channel to Swiss border. 450 miles of fortified positions. Millions of men facing each other across no man's land. All because of lessons learned at places like Entrenched. That's how warfare evolves. Not through committees or planning sessions. Through soldiers like Steele and Clark and Bennett and Murphy, who face impossible situations, find solutions, die mostly, get forgotten entirely, but change how armies fight forever. One pilot, one machine gun section. 2,000 attacking infantry. August 26, 1914. For Vickers guns, proved that industrial warfare had arrived. Proved that defensive firepower could overcome numerical superiority. Proved that sustained rate of fire mattered more than courage or tactics. Frederick Steele proved that 40 men with right weapons and determination could hold against 2,000. Kaiser Wilhelm II called it murder by machinery. He was right. That's exactly what it was, and it would define warfare for the next century. If stories like this remind you why we preserve military history, hit that like button. Subscribe for more forgotten battles and untold stories of the First World War. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we post. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Anyone in your family served in the Great War? Thanks for watching. Thanks for making sure Frederick Steele, William Clark, Thomas Bennett, and James Murphy don't disappear into silence. These men held position that saved thousands of soldiers, demonstrated defensive tactics that changed modern warfare, received almost no recognition for actions that influenced military doctrine for 100 years. You're helping make sure their story survives. We'll see you in the next video.